everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Heather and today I am here to talk to you about all of the books that I read in November. I did in fact read more than the 3 or 4 that were in the thumbnail, as I read a lot digitally. So this wrap up is going to be kind of jumbled, and honestly my reading and the feeling of this video kind of matched the way November panned out for me as well. There were a lot of high highs, but also a lot of low lows, and the time in between ended up feeling just very strange. And that's kind of how I feel about my reading. There were some books that I really enjoyed, some that I really did not, and a lot that left me feeling just kind of odd. So let's start getting through them. The first book I read was a physical book, which was Toast and Marmalade by Emma Bridgewater. Emma Bridgewater is famous for her pottery company, creating mugs that look rather like that. That's probably her most famous design. And this is her memoir. Not really about anything in particular, but about a series of memories and important moments in her life that kind of sum up who she is as a person and what she has tried to capture in her company as well. So it's really a lovely book in that she describes it as kind of a patchwork quilt, that these stories aren't necessarily connected, they're not necessarily in order. You can pick it up and put it down very easily. What I also love is that after describing a particular memory of a certain experience or time in her life, she will often also include a recipe that goes with that moment in time, which is extra fun. So yes, this is very cozy and quite a lovely read. Then, as I predicted, some of my library holds did indeed start to come in. So the first hold to come in was Long Island by Colm Tobin, and this is his sequel to Brooklyn of a few years ago. I read Brooklyn and really enjoyed it at the time, so I was intrigued to see where this one goes, and I went into it pretty blind, which honestly I think is the way to go, as the twist happens right away. What I do feel that you should know is that we follow Ailish and her husband 20 years after Brooklyn ends. That's about all you should know going in. I hated the twist in terms of what it told me about all of the characters. I hated seeing how her family dynamics had developed, both with her family and with her in-laws. Her children I found fascinating. They were quite lovely. But everything else was really quite bleak to me, which I suspect was the point, but it wasn't what I needed at the time. Yeah, that's really all I can say about Long Island. Then Divine Rivals came in by Rebecca Ross, and this has been recommended by everyone on the internet, and my friend Katie really loved it as well. I think I can see why people loved it so much. The love story was very well drawn, and that was the point that really helped me to enjoy it. But I have to say I found it very, very difficult to follow the war. If you're unfamiliar, Divine Rivals is about 2 rival journalists who are fighting for spots covering this war, which it turns out is a war between 2 ancient gods. I feel like that's really all I can say without spoiling intro plot points. Like I said, the romance element was really well done. I really enjoyed that. But the intricacies of the war itself and why it started were hard to follow. I realize that some of the origins are meant to be a mystery that we are uncovering over the course of the 2 books. But even then, I feel like we had too little information to really understand why we were locked in this war. Then the Rachel incident came in at the library by Caroline O'Donoghue, and I have to say I DNF'd this one. I read about a page or 2 and reread the synopsis and decided it was just not what I needed at that point in time. Besides which, my interest had really waned since I put it on hold in February or March. Then, as a birthday treat to myself mid-month, I picked up Isabel and the Rogue by Liana de la Rosa. This is the sequel to Anna Maria and the Fox, which I read back in August. And this is one of the Luna Sisters series. This is a series following 3 sisters who are evacuated out of Mexico to escape the French occupation in the 1860s. And they are sent to London to live with their uncle to both keep them safe and to try to help them be the public face of Mexico in London, to encourage high society and diplomats to think of actual people when they are confronted with news of the Mexican occupation, and the hopes that by humanizing Mexicans, the English might be more willing to lend aid to Mexican resistance. Of course, each sister then falls in love with someone, and we follow those trials and tribulations as well. I quite enjoyed that the danger posed to the sisters wasn't quite as high stakes as Anna Maria's book. I really loved Isabel as a character from book 1. She is quite bookish, quite shy, quite introverted, but very smart. And we follow her falling in love with a rogue. So I did really enjoy this book. It was certainly steamy, it was certainly romantic, but it felt like there was something missing to it, and I still can't quite put my finger on what that was. Maybe I'll surprise myself and enjoy Gabby's book more than either of the first 2. I don't know, we'll see. I then picked up the interesting narrative of the life of, I've always said Olaudah Equiano, but according to the introduction, the author, the scholar at least, insists that it's Olaudah Equiano. Does anyone have any insight into which way it's actually pronounced? Because I would like to pronounce it correctly. But anyway, Equiano very famously was one of the first freed Black men to write about his experiences being captured, sold into slavery multiple times, his religious experiences, as well as calling for the abolition of the slave trade. I first knew about him and this book through the movie Amazing Grace, which I highly recommend, but I had never gotten hold of his actual book until this year. I found this at a book sale and snapped it up, and I'm really glad that I did. It was a fascinating read. There are some truly horrible parts to read, of course. There are some really interesting cases where he is wrestling with a variety of religious ideas. It's interesting seeing how Black people, and whether slaved or free, are seen in various parts of the world as he traveled everywhere. Due to when it was written, it does feel quite dense in terms of style, and yet it also goes quite quickly. He will cover a number of different adventures in a couple of pages. So that's a very odd mixture of things, but I am so glad that I read it, and I will definitely be holding on to this. I then realized that I had to read 2 arcs that were sent to me. So the first one I picked up was More Than This, which is the sequel to The Davenports by Crystal Marquis. The Davenports follows a variety of young Black people in the early 20th century in Chicago who are mostly part of the elite Black society that existed at the time in Chicago, which I never knew about. So I think it's wonderful that she's writing about that period and that group of people, but you do also get a variety of perspectives within that. There are some people who are fighting for desegregation and working towards what would become the civil rights movement. There are people who are in service to these very rich families and seeing their origins, their hopes, as well as the generational tug of war between the parents and tradition and their desire for their children to have what they see as the best possible life, and the children's idea of the best possible life being very new and different. All of that was definitely present in this sequel as well. Given that it is a sequel, I can't say too much about what's going on with all of these characters here. I will say, since it had been a year or two since I read the first book, I had a tough time remembering who all of these characters were, and because it switches between all of their perspectives every chapter, that made it doubly hard to keep up with. But I did figure it out eventually, and it was wonderful seeing them go on various journeys, both external and internal, but it all felt a bit rushed to me. I think it's wonderful that these stories exist. I just would have liked the time to explore some of these storylines and this growth a little bit more. Then I was sent a copy of The Matchmaker by Aisha Saeed, which I feel like I read was advertised as a thriller type retelling of Emma, which I can kind of see, but it also completely exists as its own work as well. This is about Noura, who has taken over running a very successful Desi matchmaking company in Atlanta, Georgia. Her aunt used to run it, but she was recently diagnosed with dementia, so Noura has taken over completely. And they've been doing incredibly well. They have an in-person service, they have an app, and people are falling all over themselves to get themselves matched up. However, one or two weddings begin to fall apart at around the same time that a podcaster starts saying horrible things about Noura and the company, and she begins to wonder, is she being sabotaged? And so we go on from there, following her family drama and also trying to unravel the mystery of who is at the bottom of trying to destroy this company, and is Noura safe? I will say I think it's a clever idea if we look at it as an adaptation of Emma. I think the mystery was done really well. I was definitely kept guessing as to who was at the bottom of this conspiracy. However, that level of danger was not what I needed this month. I needed something much more cozy than that. So that dipped my enjoyment a little bit. I think had I not been in the space that I was, I might have enjoyed it a bit more. But if you are craving a high-stakes thriller, this could be the book for you. I believe it's going to be published early next year. Then we move into books that I am still currently working on. Of course, I am continuing to listen to Phineas Finn on audiobook. I am over halfway through, so I hope to finish it before the end of the year. I don't think it's my favorite Trollope, but I'm reserving judgment until I've made it through to the end. I am also a third of the way through A Life of My Own by Claire Tomalin, and I hope to at least read another chunk of it, if not finish it today. This is Claire Tomalin's memoir of her own life after having written so many famous literary biographies. And so far it's really interesting. I like that she started with brief biographies of her parents before moving into her own life as well. I think she has a really balanced perspective of the people and the time that she was living in, which is really wonderful to read in this day and age. Yeah, I'm intrigued to see where it goes from here. However, speaking of library books, another library hold came in for me, and that is The Third Gilmore Girl by Kelly Bishop, which is her memoir of her time not only being on Gilmore Girls, but also her time in other films like Dirty Dancing, which I had forgotten she was in, and her time on Broadway before that. So I'm really looking forward to starting that, but I can't let myself start it until I've made it through Claire Tomalin's book, which is not that big, so I don't feel like that's an impossible task. Of course, this is in addition to the pile of possibilities that I showed off last week for December, so stick around for my December wrap up because it could be quite a long video given that I have a lovely winter break coming up at the end of the month. But overall, a strange reading month, but I read lots more than I thought I would, which I suppose is a positive. Let me know down below what you thought of any of the books that I mentioned, if you have read them, or if you have further questions about them. Or let me know any books that you think might be good for me in the future as well, given that I've been in this strange place lately. As for right now, I am going to curl up in my comfort outfit and have some cozy food and edit this video, and then hopefully get some more reading in. Until next time, be safe, be well, and happy reading. Bye everyone.